Officer James Carter had spent his entire career serving and protecting his city. A dedicated undercover cop, he had put away some of the most dangerous criminals. But one evening, everything changed. James was at home, playing with his 7-year-old daughter, Emma. She giggled as he lifted her in the air. "Hiya, Daddy," she squealed. He smiled, promising her ice cream after dinner. But before he could keep that promise, there was a loud bang on the door. A team of officers stormed in, guns drawn. "James Carter, you are under arrest. Put your hands behind your back." James froze. He recognized the voice, his best friend, Detective Ryan Parker. Confused, he raised his hands. "Ryan, what is this? There must be a mistake." Emma clutched her father's leg. "Daddy, what's happening?" Ryan avoided eye contact as he grabbed James's wrists and snapped cold steel handcuffs around them. "You have the right to remain silent." James's heart pounded. "Ryan, talk to me. You know I didn't do anything." But Ryan stayed silent. Emma screamed as officers pulled James away. "Let me hug her. Please, just one hug," James begged, tears welling in his eyes. But the officers didn't listen. Emma sobbed, reaching out for her father, but he was dragged away into the night. At the station, James sat in an interrogation room, his mind racing. Soon, the door opened, and Ryan entered, along with the chief of police. The atmosphere was heavy. "James Carter," the chief said, "you are charged with murder and corruption. We have undeniable proof." James felt like he had been punched in the gut. "Murder? What are you talking about? I've done nothing but my job." Ryan slid a folder across the table. James hesitated before opening it. Inside were photos, bank transactions, and fake reports, all pointing to him as a corrupt cop involved in the murder of a missing witness. James's blood ran cold. "This is a setup. You know me, Ryan. You know me." Ryan finally spoke. "I'm sorry, James. But the evidence speaks for itself." James screamed in frustration, slamming his fists on the table. He saw something in Ryan's eyes. Guilt. But why wasn't he saying anything? The trial was swift. The judge sentenced James to 25 years in prison. His desperate pleas for justice fell on deaf ears. As they took him away, he looked around for Emma, but she wasn't there. He knew she had been kept away to shield her from the nightmare. As the prison doors slammed behind him, James vowed to uncover the truth. Someone had framed him. But who? And why? Meanwhile, little Emma sat by the window, clutching her father's picture, waiting for him to come home. But he didn't. James sat on the cold prison bed, staring at the cracks on the ceiling. The past few days had been a blur. One moment he was a respected cop, a loving father, and now he was nothing more than a convicted criminal. His mind kept replaying Emma's tearful face, her little hands reaching for him. Would she ever forgive him? The prison was worse than he imagined. The guards treated him like filth, and the other inmates saw him as either a target or an enemy. A group of men watched him from the corner of the cafeteria, whispering. They knew he was a cop. That was never good news in prison. One day, while James was eating alone, a tray of food was suddenly slammed onto his table. He looked up to see Bruno, a towering man covered in tattoos, smirking at him. "So, you're the famous cop," Bruno said. "Bet you thought you'd never end up here." James remained silent. He had seen men like Bruno before. Bullies, testing the weak. Bruno leaned closer. "Word is, you put away some guys from my crew. Now you're in our world, and there ain't no badge to protect you." Before James could react, Bruno threw a punch. James dodged, but another inmate grabbed him from behind. A fight broke out, fists flying, trays crashing. Guards rushed in, beating James with batons before dragging him to solitary confinement. Lying on the hard floor, James gritted his teeth. He had to survive. Days later, an older prisoner named Miguel slid a piece of paper under James's cell door. On it was a name, Detective Ryan Parker. James frowned. Why would an inmate pass him his old friend's name? That night, Miguel approached him in the yard. "I knew you were set up," he whispered. "I used to work for the people who framed you." James's heart pounded. "Who are they? Why did they do this?" Miguel glanced around nervously. Ryan was working with them. He wanted you out of the picture. There's more at play than you realize. Before James could ask more, guards blew their whistles. Miguel disappeared into the crowd. James clenched his fists. His best friend had betrayed him. But why? And how deep did this go? Meanwhile, outside the prison walls, little Emma sat on her bed, writing a letter to her father. Dear Daddy, I miss you so much. They say you are bad, but I know you're not. Please come back soon. I love you. She sealed the letter and gave it to a social worker. But the letter never reached James. Someone didn't want them to communicate. James had spent months in prison, each day feeling heavier than the last. He refused to lose hope, but the walls of his cell were closing in on him. His only source of strength was the memory of his daughter, Emma. The thought of her suffering without him gave him the determination to fight back. One evening, as he sat in the dimly lit common area of the prison, a new inmate arrived. He was a scruffy, middle-aged man with piercing eyes. James didn't think much of him until the man sat next to him and whispered, "You were framed, weren't you?" James's heart skipped a beat. "Who are you?" he asked cautiously. The man smirked. "Name's Lucas. Used to work with the same people who put you in here." James's eyes widened. "You know who set me up?" Lucas nodded. "I know a lot of things. But information isn't free." Desperate for answers, James leaned forward. "What do you want?" Lucas hesitated before saying, "Protection. I have a target on my back in here, and you seem like the type who can handle himself. Keep me safe, and I'll tell you everything." James didn't hesitate. "Deal." Over the next few weeks, James watched over Lucas, making sure no harm came to him. In return, Lucas revealed shocking information. "Detective Ryan is involved in something big," Lucas whispered one night. "He framed you to cover his own tracks. There's a network of dirty cops and criminals working together. You got too close to the truth, so they took you out." James clenched his fists. His own best friend had betrayed him. "How do I prove it?" Lucas smirked. "Lucky for you, I hid something before I got locked up. A flash drive with evidence. Bank transactions, phone calls, the whole thing." James's hope reignited. "Where is it?" Lucas sighed. "Outside this prison. And you're never getting out." But James had other plans. That night, as he lay in his bunk, a single thought consumed him. He had to escape. James Carter had spent years in prison, but he never stopped planning. Every night, he replayed the events leading to his arrest, trying to figure out who had framed him. The pieces were coming together, but time was running out. If he stayed locked up, he'd never see his daughter again. One evening, an unexpected ally approached him in the prison yard. A former hacker named Lucas, who had been arrested for cybercrimes, whispered, "I know you're innocent. And I know how to prove it." James's pulse quickened. "How?" Lucas explained that he had hacked into police files before being caught. He discovered sealed evidence that could exonerate James, hidden bank transactions and emails linking Detective Ryan to the real criminals. "But I need a way out to access the servers," Lucas said. James knew what this meant. They had to escape. Over the next few weeks, James and Lucas worked on a plan. They observed guard rotations, studied weak spots in the prison security, and smuggled small tools with the help of a sympathetic prison guard, Officer Daniels. Daniels had always believed James was innocent but was too afraid to speak up. Finally, the night arrived. Under the cover of darkness, they slipped through a maintenance tunnel, avoiding the security cameras. Lucas used a stolen keycard to unlock a side exit, but as soon as they stepped outside, alarms blared. "They know!" Lucas shouted. "Run!" Guards stormed in, flashlights cutting through the darkness. James and Lucas sprinted towards the fence. James boosted Lucas over first, then climbed after him. Just as he reached the top, a guard grabbed his leg. Bang! A gunshot rang out. Officer Daniels had fired at the guard, buying James enough time to jump over and escape into the night. Breathing heavily, they disappeared into the city. "We need to move fast," Lucas said. "I can crack into those police files, but we need a safe place." James thought of an old friend, a journalist named Sarah, who had once investigated police corruption. If anyone could help get the truth out, it was her. As they reached a safe house, James couldn't help but think about Emma. She still believed he was guilty. She still thought her father was a monster. "Hang on, baby girl," he whispered. "Daddy's coming home." But Detective Ryan had already discovered James's escape, and he wasn't about to let the truth come out. James was now a wanted fugitive. The world believed he was a dangerous man, but in reality, he was just a father trying to clear his name. Hiding in an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city, he stared at a faded picture of Emma, his heart aching for the day he could hold her again. He couldn't stay hidden forever. He needed to act fast. Using a stolen phone, James contacted his old friend and investigative journalist, Sarah Mitchell. She had always suspected corruption within the police force and was one of the few people who might believe him. "Sarah, I have proof. They set me up. I need your help." Sarah hesitated, but after a long silence, she agreed to meet. "There's an abandoned motel near Highway 19. Midnight. Come alone." James knew he was taking a risk, but he had no choice. As he made his way through the dark streets, he sensed danger. He wasn't just being hunted by the police. Someone else was watching him. The moment he stepped into the motel, the sound of screeching tires filled the air. Before he could react, gunshots shattered the silence. James dove behind an overturned table, his heart racing. Someone had tipped them off. He recognized the voice barking orders outside. It was Detective Ryan Parker. "James Carter. Come out now. There's no escape." James clenched his fists. His own best friend had betrayed him. But he wasn't going to give up. Not now. Not ever. He grabbed a fire escape ladder and climbed to the roof. As he ran across the buildings, Ryan and his men fired at him, missing by inches. James leaped onto another rooftop, barely catching his footing. He knew if he got caught now, he'd never see Emma again. Just as he thought he had lost them, a black SUV blocked his path. The doors opened, and out stepped a tall, well-dressed man, the real mastermind behind everything. James's blood ran cold. "You. It was you all along." The man smirked. "You should have stayed in prison, James. Now you've left me no choice." James knew this was it. He had to fight or die trying. James took a step back, his mind racing. The man standing before him was Victor Reynolds, a notorious businessman with deep connections to corrupt politicians and dirty cops. James had suspected him for years but never had proof, until now. "Why did you do this?" James asked, his fists clenched. Victor chuckled. "You were getting too close. I couldn't let that happen." Before James could react, Victor's men attacked. James fought back with everything he had. He dodged punches, landed blows, and grabbed a metal pipe from the ground, using it to defend himself. But there were too many of them. Just when it seemed like they would overpower him, gunshots rang out. The attackers fell one by one. James turned to see Sarah Mitchell, holding a gun. "I wasn't going to let you do this alone," she said. "Let's go. We need to expose him." James and Sarah fled the scene, leaving Victor cursing behind them. They had evidence now, but they needed to be smart. The truth was finally within reach, but time was running out. James stood in the courtroom, his hands trembling. This was the moment he had waited for. After years of suffering, running, and fighting for the truth, the final verdict was about to be announced. The judge cleared his throat. After reviewing the new evidence and the corruption scandal that has come to light, this court finds James Carter not guilty. A wave of relief washed over James. He closed his eyes, tears forming. The courtroom erupted into whispers as reporters rushed to break the news. James had finally been cleared of all charges. He was free. Emma, now 10 years old, sat in the front row, her small hands gripping the seat. As soon as the judge spoke those words, she jumped up and ran toward her father. "Daddy!" James dropped to his knees, arms wide open, as Emma crashed into him. He held her tightly, finally feeling the warmth of his daughter after years of separation. "I missed you so much, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice breaking. Tears streamed down Emma's face. "I knew you'd come back, Daddy. I never stopped waiting for you." The entire room watched in silence, some wiping away tears at the powerful reunion. Even the judge looked emotional. It was a scene no one would forget. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded James, eager for a statement. Mr. Carter, how do you feel knowing that your best friend, Detective Ryan Parker, was the one who framed you? James took a deep breath. Betrayal cuts deep, he said, looking at the cameras. But the truth is stronger. I may have lost years of my life, but justice was served. And now, my only focus is my daughter. Meanwhile, Ryan sat in a prison cell, staring at the walls. The same cold, unforgiving prison that James had once suffered in was now his reality. He had lost everything: his job, his freedom, his reputation. But worst of all, he had lost the trust of the only friend who ever truly cared about him. James and Emma visited a small graveyard later that evening. Kneeling in front of a simple gravestone, James placed a hand on the cold marble. "I kept my promise," he whispered. "I came back to Emma." The wind blew softly as if carrying the words to the heavens. He closed his eyes, knowing that wherever his wife was, she was finally at peace. Holding Emma's hand, James looked up at the sunset. For the first time in years, he felt hope. The nightmare was over.